Well, Days in Miami fans, we are back. Another episode, and this was a good one.
This is a really good one.
This is a real good one.
As opposed to the other one?
The other ones,
they're all good.
The other ones are good, but this is a
really
good one. This is a good one because there's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions, and there's good questions, and there's things that are happening in the pipeline, which I want Day in Miami fans to learn about and understand.
Yeah.
Some things that the mayor is doing. So with that, welcome, Mayor Francis Suarez.
Thank you, Manny. But I just want to be clear that I did this interview on one condition.
Yes, sir.
That Manny would do my podcast so I could interview Manny and tell stories about the city of Miami prior to my father being the mayor in 1985. So we got to get some.
Well, Manny has a lot of stories.
Right, of course. That was the understanding of me coming.
And you know what's crazy? A lot of people ask me, "Who is this guy?" And to quote on terms, they've told me, "Who is this Papi Chulo that you talk to on your podcast?"
There you go.
So
I don't know if that's
wait. Every time me cae un petardo eso que diga on your podcast.
No, like on our podcast.
Oh,
on our podcast.
So just for viewers' knowledge, I'm going to be asking for Cuban coffee
Cuban
throughout.
coffee.
Who are the ones
Without
out there
sugar.
saying on his podcast?
No, it's not. It's the community's podcast.
They're having a
It's the
conversation,
community's
so I'm just going
podcast.
to drink coffee while these guys are.
Anyway, oye, we're ecstatic to have Francis on the podcast.
Yeah.
fun
Apart
to be
from
with you
that,
guys.
I mean, we have a whole bunch of questions that we send out first to all our people that
It's actually people from Day in Miami that asked
Day in
these
Miami
things,
that asked this question. Very good questions, but before we get into that, I wanna start with a couple of things. There's because this is important. There's an event that's coming up. There's an event that I want to say that we talked about for a while, and then all of a sudden, Francis really wanted to do something in the city, and he really wanted to do something for the homeless. So when we got together and everybody was talking about this, and what do we do? I was a little bit taken back because Francis shed some light on a great organization that, to tell you the truth, I really didn't even know it existed here.
Yeah.
And when I heard them and I went to them and I sat with them and I saw what these people do, the word is wow, because the word is something that is spectacular what these people do. And I really want Francis to focus a little bit before we get into all those questions, because this is really an important situation. It's a very important cost to him, and it's something that's happening in the city of Miami for the first time.
It is, and I thank you for bringing it up. And I love the concept of the podcast. We talked a little bit about it off the air and talking about what's happening in the city from a positive perspective. We always, of course, we're inundated with the negative, and that's part and parcel to the way the world runs right now on clicks and stuff. But I think we need to pat ourselves a little bit on the back as a community. What we've done on the issue of homelessness, when you compare it to other major American cities, is nothing short of miraculous. And it's not something that is the responsibility of one organization. It's really the responsibility of our community and a variety of organizations. You have, the Homeless Trust being run by Ron Book and Vicky Millette. You have Camilla's House and the work, that Hilda was doing up until recently. So many people that are involved in Camilla's and making it such a great organization. You have Lotus House.
Yep.
You have Christie House. You have all of these incredible organizations. I was talking to Adam Potamkin about Christie's House, Constance Collins about Lotus House. All the work that they're doing. The issue for me was we've taken it from essentially 9,000 or 10,000 homeless in our county. Our metropolitan county has about 3 million people, and we've reduced it to about 900 to 1,000. So that's already happened. That's a 90% reduction.
Huge.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But then I started thinking to myself, a few years ago, we reached a goal that was called Functional Zero Veteran Homeless. Now, the concept of Functional Zero means it's not exactly zero. It means, every once in a while you may have one here, one there, but it's essentially zero, right? Yeah. It's kind of like what we talk about when we say full employment. Sometimes there's like a cyclical unemployment. So there's going to be homeless, one here, one there, hopefully, but hopefully not, but no more than that. So the idea was, if we got to functional zero veteran homeless, why can't we get to functional zero overall homeless? And you got to understand that we have 630 unsheltered homeless in the city of Miami. It's about 2/3 of the entire unsheltered population. So we're only about 1/6 of the total population of the county, but we have 2/3 of the homeless population. So that's something that we, sort of feel more strongly than others. And when you think about what we've built as a city, where we built a city that has the lowest unemployment in America, the highest wage growth in America, lowest taxes in history. We had the lowest per capita homicide rate last year in history. You know, all these incredible statistics. You think to yourself, we're a successful American city. A lot of cities are not succeeding, but we also are a very compassionate city. And I think we don't get enough credit for how much we care about people, particularly people who are in the most difficult of circumstances.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of people, Manny, you and I talked about this, you know, tell me, don't go out there and say it. Don't say that you want to end homelessness because it's impossible. It can't be done. And my view is if you never set what appears to be an unattainable goals or big goals, you're never going to get there if you don't try. And so we put this goal out there. We started funding it a couple of years ago. And now we've identified an organization called Hermanos de la Calle.
Correct.
It's a faith-based organization that's been in business for about 8 years. It's got about 20 employees, a $2 million budget. And what they do is unique, right? Camilla's and Homeless Trust, for example, have permanent shelters and also want to get into the business of building housing, permanent housing, which is a great model. There's all kinds of statistics that show that if people get into permanent housing, they have a great chance of succeeding. Hermanos' model is similar but different. Right, they rent out already existing homes, and place and rehabilitate the homeless or formerly homeless, hopefully, and help them pay on average $400 in rent through the acquisition of benefits and through finding jobs.
Well, I was going to ask you a question. For those people out there that, you know, usually the scenario is you're in the street, driving in the city, you see someone homeless or you see someone sleeping on the side of the road, and the first thing you think of, most people say, that person's lazy. They're not getting a job. What is I'm curious of what is usually the reasons why people are homeless?
There's a variety. You know, sometimes it's mental health issues. Sometimes it's they lose a job, and we're probably not totally conscious of how many people are close, living kind of paycheck to paycheck. They lose their job, and all of a sudden,
a lot of them are.
Wow.
They get kicked out of their house. Some of it is, even though we have a very low unemployment, so that buffers, right? And that's why I think we have a low homeless rate too. Because people are finding work. And then, you have people with substance abuse issues, particularly opioids are incredibly addictive. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen any statistics on opioids, but even people who have a lot of resources, if you get hooked on opioids, the chance of beating that addiction is very, very low according to the statistics. So, you have these...
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you have these set of factors that can come together. Some of them happen at the same time, right? Some people have mental health issues that come from drug abuse. So you can have most of these, and then, and then I think you get separated from your family. You get used to living on the street, and it becomes a cycle.
Right? And if somebody out there wants to help, which most people that I've dealt with through United Way,
they want to
help.
to.
Like, how could someone usually help? How can they get involved?
So at the individual level, I think one of the things that I did when I was younger, not even an elected official, is I would go to places like Camilla's or the Homeless Assistance Center, and I would serve lunch, right? Because you get to interact, you get to talk to some of the people who are homeless, you get to understand. The question that you just asked is a great question, right? The fundamental question: why are you in this situation? And I think those organizations need help. If you're someone who has resources, I think donating to one of those organizations or an initiative of the one that we're doing, which is the mayor's gala to end homelessness in Miami, is a great opportunity. We're going to have an event on June 1st. And hopefully we're going to be able to raise enough money to give this organization the resources to get most, if not all, the 630 people that are unsheltered off the street.
He just gave me an idea, and I think it's something that we could actually help with a day in Miami. We can do like a homeless give back event too, and like count on the a day in Miami community and stuff.
One of the things that I'm thinking about, and I haven't really made it public, but I guess now we will, right?
Why not? Wait, right here, right here in Miami,
is. And look, I'm not going to say that spending a night on the street with the homeless, it lets you know exactly what it's like to be homeless. But I think, a lot of people do feedings, right, which kind of make you feel good in the moment that you're giving them a meal, but it's not really solving the problem. I think the more you integrate, and again, I'm not saying that one night on the street is going to, but it gives you a better perspective, right, how hard it is to sleep on the pavement. What are the conditions they're sleeping in? How many people...
Yeah,
what are their activities?
You think about it, and mentally you're saying to yourself, where am I going to be today? Is it going to rain? Not going to rain?
So imagine if we did an initiative where we had 630 Miamians sleep on the street for a night.
Wow.
That's a good one. I love that.
That'll go worldwide.
Right, because
Yeah.
because I think the issue is no, but first of all, I don't think anybody's done it.
No one's done it. That's what I'm saying.
And number two, it's like that the old adage, walk a mile in my shoes. If you really want to know what I'm going through, walk. And again, I'm not saying that one day, I don't want to overstate.
No, but it'll
one
give you
day is one day.
It's a good little perspective.
But we
Absolutely.
all live comfortably. You know what I mean? Like I want to sleep in a comfortable bed. I know when I come back from a work trip, when I get in my own bed, it's like, oh,
brother,
man, it feels
I don't
so
think
good.
there's anything worse than not having AC. Like my AC breaks and it's you can't sleep. I cannot imagine someone sleeping in the streets.
So imagine you wake up to the sun in your face. I mean, it's there's no.
Do you can't shower in the morning.
shower,
Where you're gonna go? Okay, I'm hungry. Let me go walk. I got to walk all the way. Where get that?
So
It's
I
crazy.
think a lot of it is we take for granted.
Yes.
Right. These amazing blessings that we have as Miamians, and I think it's an opportunity for us to understand the way other people are suffering in our country.
That's a good way.
Well, I always say that one of the best things of being a politician, apart from trying to resolve problems, is to put your name as an advocate of a institution and a cause, because you shed light on that. Yeah. You're putting a lot of a spotlight to the amount of that guy, which again people didn't know existed. So it's something there. I love what those people do. I mean, I sat down with this guy and what these people do.
Manny, you're a student of our government.
Absolutely.
You've been around it you've seen all the iterations, and there's two kinds of leadership, right? There's a leadership that you can effectuate as a result of the government that you work in, like making decisions. You hire this guy for whatever, all that stuff. And the mayor's position right now is kind of a limited position, right? You can hire the city manager, but you don't hire the other employees.
Correct.
You can veto legislation, but it can be overturned. Even the city manager that you hire have to be ratified and can be fired directly by the country.
Correct.
So the bigger, I think, influence that you can have as a public official is your ability to get involved
100%.
In charities, to get involved as a national spokesman for your city or an international spokesman for your city, to try to build the brand, to build ecosystems. Like those are things that are not within the four corners of like what it is to run the city day in and day out. And I think that's actually a better
based on that you just say right now, that you become that ambassador. Yeah. You become that ambassador to the cities. Again, I think that moving on to the next question, now that you just said that is something that I think that you have done spectacular, in the sense that you have become an ambassador of bringing, and Ed and I were talking about this, all these companies from California, from New York, all these tech companies that are moving now to the city of Miami.
I think a lot of people underestimate the difficulty of like doing those type of things, and they just see it from afar and like, that's easy to do. You have power, you have media. Like, for those people who don't know you, or maybe who've only seen the last 2 years of what you've done, or the last 4 years, what drove you first to become a mayor? Like, and who is Mayor Francis Suarez?
Well, Mayor Francis Suarez, I hate to talk in the third person. I'm a product of this community. I was born here in Mercy Hospital. I think it's interesting because we have not been able to identify another mayor since the city began in 1896 that was actually born in the city. So I think what's interesting about that is I'm the first mayor who was a product of this community. I went to high school in this community. I went to junior high school in this community. I went to school in this community. I lived in this community my whole life, with the exception of law school, where I left to go to law school. But the entirety of my time in Miami, I have lived in the city of Miami. Yeah.
And that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. My father was also the mayor, so it's the first father and son ever. My father was the first Cuban mayor of the city of Miami in 1985. So
you learned a lot from him, watching him grow up.
Of course. And there's a legacy, there's a pride. When you talk about the evolution of the city, and Manny was a part of it as well, when you started to see when Mayor Ferre in 1973 takes office, you start to see Miami really truly becoming an international city, the gateway to Latin America. Right. And so that metamorphosis began under Mayor Ferre, continued under my father, who was mayor from 1985 to 93. So you had this almost 20-year period where you saw the city really blossom. Right. And then for me, having been born here, having grown up here, I've always, seen how much talent this community produces. Right. But a lot of times that talent leaves. Right. They go to if they want to do finance, they go to New York. If they want to do tech, they go to California. If they want to do politics, they go to Washington, right? So these have been like the major national centers for these activities, right? And so for me, I always, maybe because I was born here, I always had a chip on my shoulder, like, and think to myself, why can't we be that place, right? Why do we lose? Why have we always been an intellectual talent exporter, right? and it was always a dream for me to build that ecosystem or those ecosystems here in our own city. I've had a lot of help. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is a one person thing. I remember when I started 15 years ago, Manny Medina telling me, hey, I built a tech company, sold it for what they would call now today a unicorn, right? For over $1 billion.
Yeah.
And it was hard because Miami was not seen as a tech city. So it was hard to get tech talent here. And then he created Emerge, which I'm a board member of. Huge thing to try to build this ecosystem. And he brought on Melissa, who's phenomenal. And, little by little, I always say we're a 15-year overnight success story. So we were building this thing little by little. They would, in the tech community, they would call it bootstrap, right?
Yeah.
You use your own money, you reinvest your own money and grow the company slowly, but, surely. And then we had what I would consider like a radical growth moment, which was in December 4, 2020, when somebody put out a tweet that said, hey, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami? And I responded, how can I help? And the reason why it was such a blast was because at the same time, New York was saying no to Amazon after they won the HQ2 prize.
AOC.
Exactly. And you had California saying F Elon Musk. He replied, message received, and left to Austin.
I'm out.
So this was the
Rogan
context.
left, everybody.
So this is the context of that moment, right? And then you had COVID, you had the SALT deduction going away, which is a state and local tax deduction going away. So now all of a sudden New York's become 14% more expensive. Chicago becomes 14% more expensive. California becomes 14% more expensive. So you have all this happening at the same time, right? So the fact that it all happened at the same time was a huge opportunity. I call it a tsunami of opportunity. And most people, when they see a tsunami, they hide. We took out our surfboards. We wanted to wave. We wanted to ride the.
I like that one.
I like that. That's a good one.
I like that one.
That was actually one of the questions that we had here to talk about.
The surfboard?
No, not the surfboard, but the influx of everyone from Cali, New York, etc.
Yeah.
How has that, obviously that's affected the local community as well too, and I see it all the time on our page when we post about things. People complain, okay, these guys are here. Don't New York, my Florida. Don't California, my Florida. How do we kind of make that balance of making sure that Florida or Miami stays Miami?
So there's a lot of rhetoric about this issue. So let's actually look at the numbers, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit of politics and a little bit of cost of living.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's kind of like the good and the bad.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So the good is there was a perception that from a political perspective, and I happen to be Republican, right? So from a political perspective, there was a perception that people coming from, let's call them blue cities, right? Like Democrat cities, would come to Miami and impose that ideology on Miami. We haven't seen that play out, right? In fact, we've seen the opposite. And I've often said people that migrated from Cuba are not going back. They're not coming here to impose socialism on our 100%. People. They're fleeing socialism. So I think that has already played out. And you've seen, for example, in 2016, Miami-Dade County, Trump lost it to Hillary Clinton by 30 points. Yeah. And in 2022, right, just 6 years later, Marco and DeSantis won Dade County by 10 and 12 points, right? So that's a 40-point shift in favor of Republicans.
Yep.
Right. So that whole thing of, that hasn't really played out. Now, on the cost of living side, that has played out. Yeah. Right. And I would say the following on that issue. Number one, and again, not to be hyper political, but the inflation that Biden's overspending has created a massive, and this is you can look at this to verify what I'm going to say, has created a massive amount of rental inflation across America. Massive amount. So I'm talking about over double digits for every major city in America. So every major city in America is seeing a massive amount of rental expense inflation. Miami's seeing more than all of them. And the reason why is because everybody's coming to Miami.
Correct.
Right? We have what I call hyper demand. Everybody wants to be here. So you have that inflation, plus you have what I call a hyper demand premium, right? Which is a delta from that. So that's making us probably one of the most expensive increases in rental markets in the country. So that's true.
Well, to your point, when we had Andrew from River Landing here, he had mentioned that to us. He goes, guys, to people from California and New York and even overseas,
it's cheap.
Miami's super cheap. So they're going to push everybody out.
Right. They're still going to come over.
So my view on this is a few things. Number one is, thankfully, unlike New York and San Francisco, we have the ability to grow. So we have to push growth, right? Like we can grow 10 times larger, and obviously that creates other issues, traffic, infrastructure, et cetera. So I don't want to just pretend like that's not happening. But growing and increasing our supply could maintain prices lower.
Correct.
I think the other thing we do have to do is we've been successful at building affordable housing and workforce housing. We have to do more of it.
Yeah.
Right. We have to make sure that our police officers, our firefighters, our teachers, and our nurses, I think those are 4 base professions, can
Essentials.
live. Essential workers can live in the city. So we got to focus on that as well.
That was one of the questions actually we had here. It was about affordable housing and like, is there anywhere that someone can go to? Like, how does the city actually help with that?
So what we have a couple of funding sources. One of them is a Miami Forever bond, where we allocated $100 million for affordable housing projects. The beauty of that $100 million is that we get a leverage so far. I mean, and this doesn't, with interest rates going up, which is another problem that we've seen with inflation.
Yeah.
Interest rates have gone up during the current administration. You're not going to get the same leverage, but we were getting a 20-to-1 leverage rate. What do I mean by that? For every dollar we were investing in, let's call it the capital stack, or for every dollar of dollar invested in a project, we were getting the remaining $20 or $19 were being put by somebody else, another government, a bank, or equity, right? That was the remaining capital stack. So we were getting for our $1, $19 of corresponding investment in a project. So that's great. That's phenomenal. With rates going up, that number is going to come down. It may come down to 10 to 1. It's still good. So that means for every $100 million you invest, you're getting $1 billion a project, right? We were getting $2 billion for $100 million. So that's one. The other one is something called the CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, not to be confused with other CRAs, because there's other CRAs in the federal code. This is a state program. And if we extend that, we're going to have $100 to $200 million of more resources, right, without raising taxes. And we can leverage that at a 20-to-1 or 10-to-1 ratio, depending on interest rates. So that's anywhere between $1 billion to $3 billion worth of product. Look, you never have enough.
Yeah.
You always want more.
Yeah, everybody wants more.
But you have to balance the fact that, and this is where sometimes when I see some of these comments online, I get a little worried.
Yeah.
Right? Because our parents were exiled from their country of birth, which was Cuba, right? Because a guy said, give us all your property, give us all your businesses, we'll make everybody
we'll make everybody happy.
Yeah. And what they did was they made everybody equally poor and equally miserable. Yeah. And so what concerns me sometimes when I see these comments is, I wonder if some of the people that are commenting understand what they're saying. What they're saying is they want government to come in.
Unfortunately, some don't.
They don't.
They want government to come in
Yeah.
and start setting all these rules.
Yeah.
I think government can help. I think we should help. I think we have a more responsibility to help. And I think if we do it the right way, like these public-private partnerships where we're leveraging a 10-to-1 or 20-to-1, I think that's a great investment. I worry, though, when we keep pushing the envelope, and what I've done also is focus on the income side, because that's the expense side. What affordable housing is, how do you make your expense, which is housing, lower?
Yeah.
But I've also tried to focus on the income side. How do we create better jobs? How do we create pathways to prosperity? We're number one in the nation in wage growth, meaning that we're number one in the growth of our wages. Can we do better? Of course we can do better.
And we just got Apple coming here now, too.
Apple's a big one.
That's huge.
Microsoft was a big one.
Amazon, too, I heard is trying to bring more people
we got
here.
Jeff Bezos here. We've got Leo Messi here, Tom Brady. Everybody wants to be here.
So I'm glad you touched on that point. Talk to a little quickly. What does it mean for Mayor Suarez, about bringing the soccer stadium here to the city of Miami?
I think the soccer stadium was huge for 2 reasons. The first is, and of course, to George and Jose's credit, I got to give them a lot of credit. They went out there and did something no one expected them to do, which is to get Leo Messi. And then they continued to parlay that in getting Busquets and Alba and all these incredible players. I mean, it really goes to George's personality and David Beckham as well, and his relationship. I don't want to undervalue David's relationship with Messi and his role in it as well. These guys are just incredible guys. So they have made us look good as a city that, by the way, did a deal that's I say it's unprecedented in sports history. In fact, so much so that I've had high-level people in soccer tell me, do not talk about the deal because it's so good. We don't ever want it to be a model.
We don't want to have it again.
We don't want it to be a model because it can't.
Broke it.
Yeah. Because it's not good. It's not good for the teams.
Yeah.
Look, they're paying fair market value rent.
Yeah.
So we're giving them zero subsidy on the rent, zero subsidy on the stadium, right? If you look at the Buffalo deal, if you look at the Jackson
that's
Jaguar deal,
that's important for people.
But I think $1 billion subsidies they're getting. They get zero subsidy. They're paying fair market value rent. It was voter approved. We're going to make in revenue, so zero.
Yeah.
We give them zero. We're going to make in revenue, conservatively, I think a couple of $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah. And I like voter approved. It was voter approved.
We created, they had to remediate the land at their cost, $30 to $50 million cost. They gave us $20 million for the park. So we're going to create out of a golf course, which again, I feel bad for the people who play golf there, but
Which I played golf there the last week that they closed. Too.
Yeah,
That
I
was
feel
nice.
bad. I feel bad. I
No,
wish
but
you could
there's
have
golf
both.
courses- listen, there's golf
And I
courses all
wish
over
we
the
could have
city.
both.
Yeah.
But the point is now it's going to be a 60-acre park. So one of the things I would tell people is, look, this is going to go from a parcel where 1% of Miamians
Correct.
use it to a parcel where 99% of Miamians use it. So from a utility
As they say in
perspective,
Spanish, se cae de la mata.
right? But you have people that still criticize it. They criticize our appraisals as if they're more sophisticated than Houlihan Lokey
Yeah.
and Deloitte
Yeah.
and Touche, who are the companies that appraised it. It's always. I mean, that's the part that for me sometimes is it worries me about our city. Is even when we do things as right as you possibly can do it, there's still haters and naysayers and critics.
That's another
Yeah,
question we
I don't
had
wanna get
on
into
our
that.
thing about
But
how do we feel about all the haters. But
I think like there's two things here, and I've asked you this question before, and then now you're actually like in the fire of it.
Yeah.
But the landscape of politics has become so hyper political that it's
Oh,
changed.
it's crazy.
From when
It's
you
totally
used to do it
changed.
before, that you had a Democratic mayor
Yeah.
that you ran,
Yeah.
and you have a Republican mayor, and
Yeah.
you are more Republican than Democrat. you
Yeah.
know? So, but back then, people would reach across the aisle
no,
and actually
that
work
didn't
together.
exist. That didn't exist.
So let me just say a few things about it. One is there's a huge amount of toxicity, like you said, a huge amount of negativity. Number one. Number two. Thank you.
Wait, we're gonna do a shot.
You want to fill them up the water? You want to fill them
Yeah,
up?
I'll take some water.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do Cuban. With the others, we do the tequila, but with the mayor, we do Cuban coffee.
And no sugar.
And no
This-
sugar.
This has to be the most ripped mayor in
I got it.
in
Listen,
politics.
man, listen. Fitness for me, I think, is a big deal. It's mental
is.
health.
It is. Wait.
It's mental health. It's not just physical health. And we've made it into an initiative for kids. We can talk a little bit
it's
about
huge.
that.
Yeah, I think that's great.
But I'll tell you,
let's continue on the other one.
Yeah, look, I think, anybody who gets into politics has to have a high threshold for being criticized.
I tell them all
You
the
got to
time.
have thick skin.
You
And I don't
got
have a
to.
problem with that. My issue is this. If somebody is criticizing me in good faith, they disagree with my position, they disagree with a decision I made, I have no problem with that. I'm okay with it. I always say reasonable people can differ.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And if they think I have bad judgment, that's okay too, because there's elections, and every election you have the right to choose
That's
a
why
different
we have
person.
elections. That's why we live in this country.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I got elected to do my best to try to make decisions.
And you
that I
got
think-
reelected.
and reelected.
Correct.
Blessed to be elected by 85%, blessed to be reelected by close to 80%.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with, and what I think is wrong in our community, and we got to figure this out because it's going to affect our politics going into another generation,
Especially for our kids.
is people who are acting in bad faith. Is it bad faith because they don't agree with you ideologically, and they try to present themselves as champions of whatever of goodness when they're really just ideological opponents of you and they want to destroy you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or worse, are people getting paid, right, to hurt you?
Unfortunately, that happens.
And what we saw it happen back in the day in the Cuban radio thing,
Oh,
where
big
you
time.
had
Big time.
moderators. Now we're starting to see it in the social media side, right? And I'm not accusing any specific person, but I'm just telling you that I find it very hard to believe that people who are constantly attacking us, to a point where I had a person who was attacking me. Out of 365 days in the year, 180. Now, if that person's
Full-time job.
if that person's not getting paid,
I
then
don't
that
know.
person's obsessed.
Yeah.
It's one or the other.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
If they're
I hope they're getting
tweeting,
paid.
retweeting, or whatever, 180 times.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing with their life. Right.
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing?
Right.
To attack at that level of intensity. So, and again, this is like I asked an intern, can you do me a favor and check to see how many times this person has?
Right.
180 times, right, in a year. That's massive.
Massive.
And that person has an influential network, and so they can influence the perception of you. And so when they're constantly going, it's the old adage: if you repeat a lie enough times, people start to think it's the truth. 100%. And then I don't have the time and the energy to be there 180 times a day, just saying I'm a great guy, I'm a good person, I'm really doing this right, I'm doing that right. I take moments when, for example, I was attacked, I think, unfairly. I believe unfairly and viciously, that turned into ethics complaints against me, right? They were all dismissed, thankfully. And when they were dismissed, I came out there and said, hey, guys, this is what happened.
Yes.
And again, other than that, I try not to focus on it because I'm like you guys. I'm very positive. I like to focus on a positive narrative for the city.
No, you have other things to do. You're trying to put the city.
I'm trying to run.
You're
the
trying to
city.
run a city.
Right.
And talking about that, talking about FIFA.
Yeah.
Huge.
FIFA is coming now, World Cup 2026.
It's amazing.
Right? We have headquarters here
The
in
Gables.
Coral Gables.
Yeah.
I saw all of them the other day having lunch at Maíz and Agave, a new
Yeah.
restaurant that opened down the
Yeah.
block here. We have 7 games that we're hosting for the World Cup. I'm curious. How does the city prepare for something like this?
Well, it's a huge event, right? It's like 7 Super Bowls, if you think about it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Activations everywhere.
First time
Activations
ever.
everywhere.
Yeah.
First time ever. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to secure, the World Cup for the United States, which we got it in addition to Mexico and Canada. We have most of the games, most of the cities, I think 14 of the 16 cities. And obviously spent a lot of time trying to secure with a lot of other people trying to secure the headquarters for Miami. And I think it helps that we're arguably the hottest city in the world right now. And I think Gianni, who's the president of FIFA, loves Miami and is now living here, by the way.
Yep.
So, these are great things. I think we are really making noise at the global level, right? Where people seeing the center of gravity of the United States shifting to Miami.
Yep.
I really believe that.
Me too.
I mean, now people could think I'm a homer. I was born here. Yeah, well, that's America.
No,
We're supposed to say
everybody's
that.
the same.
But I believe that, and I think there's a lot of evidence, credible evidence, when you see a guy like Ken Griffin, who's worth $30 billion, say, "Hey, I think that the financial capital of America could be Miami." That's a serious statement.
A serious
from a guy,
statement, yeah.
Right? Who's made a big bet because he himself has moved. He's moved his company. He's bought a lot of property here. So look, I think. It's exciting what's happening. I think FIFA is, the World Cup is one of the largest global events on the planet, the largest potentially. Yeah. And for us to be the headquarters and to have the bronze medal. I mean, I think it's a bronze medal game.
Yeah, the bronze medal.
Which is the runner-up game essentially. Is huge. I would have loved to have had the first game, but we tried hard.
Yeah, the actual final.
Yeah,
but
that
there's
would
going
be
to be a lot of
amazing.
stuff.
I think they're doing the final in Canada, no?
In New York.
Yeah, in New York.
So
that's good too.
Look, it is
New York.
it is what it is. We worked hard. We got 7 games. We got the bronze medal. It's an incredible achievement for our community. I don't think anybody would have. And it was. By the way, people don't. I like. There's a saying. They see the glory, but they don't know the real story.
Yeah.
They don't know that I one day got up at 6 o'clock on a Sunday to get together with our team to make sure, because the bid was kind of in jeopardy and we had to keep it together. And there's a lot of people that were involved.
That's exciting, but that's exciting. That was exciting.
Nameless people that are a big part of this that I want to give a shout out to. They know who they are.
Yeah. And then, so we have all these events. You have F1 that comes to the city. You have Art Basel. You have, obviously, FIFA is coming. How does the city prepare for something like the traffic that's going to go on? Like, that's always going to be a situation,
Yeah, it is. And I think because of the quantity and the intensity of these events, it's now becoming a real issue.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think before, if you had just Art Basel, which was, 1 week out of the year,
Right.
and you had... But now you have Art Basel, Formula One, Milken, FII.
Yeah.
You have JP Morgan Global. I mean, you have now. There's a lot of events where Miami is essentially the epicenter of the world.
Yep.
When Formula One comes, everybody from the
please.
world
The world.
comes
over here.
It's
We are the
crazy.
most exciting and interesting event in the world.
Yep.
Not in Miami, not in America, not in Florida, in the world. So we're seeing more and more of those kinds of events locating in Miami, and so I think we've got to be really strategic about it. I have approximately 500 plus days in office, so I'm going to be focusing on it. Ferries is something that we should really look at.
Good idea.
Ferries, which I think there are some people in the private sector side looking at it. As a TPO, we studied it. We found out that from Aventura and Black Point, right, south and north, you can save up to 40 minutes a day in your daily commute.
That'd be great. It'd be
If you-
beautiful, too.
If you use
Even
a
off the
ferry.
river.
Yeah.
So ferries is one. Urban air mobility, I believe eventually we're going to have, like now we're seeing, I have a Tesla, it drives
fly?
itself. Yeah. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in our lifetime most likely. And it'll be autonomous. It'll be electric. So it'll be, and then I think the third one is we got to look seriously at the boring company.
I would like that.
Geology wise, when you look at conventional underground rail, in New York, it's $2 billion a mile. That's super expensive. If they can do the tunneling at 10 or 20 million a mile, that's 1/100th the cost. That is a radical disruption. And so you can do underground tunneling, assuming you can do it and the geology's there. And people say, the water table. Look, in Las Vegas, where you currently have boring tunnels in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
it's under the water table. Believe it or not, even though it's
Yes,
deeper.
yes.
It does have water. At 15 feet, that's the water level. And the tunnels are
Crazy.
underwater.
Yeah, the same thing that when you take
Yeah.
it from London to Paris.
Yeah.
You're the water.
Yeah.
Well, and even our port tunnel, which is obviously
Yeah.
under the port, so it's
Yeah.
underwater too.
So before you go, you said we have how many more days in office?
I don't like to count the exact number.
No,
I don't know
but
when
it's
it's
not.
going to
We're
be
not
released.
counting, but
It's a little over 500.
500. Okay, so have we peaked, or what else is in the sights for Mayor Suarez and the city to still achieve?
So I would say 2 things. One is there's no such thing as peaking.
Okay.
That's not.
I like it. I like it.
And number two, you got to guard against the downside, right? Which is there's no such thing as peaking, meaning our potential is limitless. Our ability to grow, our ability to meet some of these and exceed some of these markers and some of these goals and ideals, I think, is limitless. But the second part is almost as important as the first part, which is we cannot become complacent. I was reading a quote from Jeff Bezos where he talks about wanting his employees to sort of live in fear, right? In a healthy fear of competition, right? And the fear that if you become complacent, somebody's going to disrupt you out of existence, right? So my point is from the city side is we cannot sit back and say, oh my God, we're there.
Right.
No, part of the reason why we're doing well and we're winning is because other cities became complacent.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And started taking their supremacy in these areas for granted and saying, oh, we could say no to Amazon. It's no big deal. It's not about the 50,000 high paying jobs only. It's about the signal. If you build $1 trillion company and you want to locate your headquarters in our city, we don't want you. So forget about that one company. What are you telling every other company? Right? So it's the signal. Yeah. And I think our signal is we're gritty, we're hardworking. We want to taste that scale that we're seeing other places have. And that's one of the cool things about technology is you can scale businesses to solve global solutions and, and create a tremendous amount of wealth that allow you to go from a company. If you really think of like, what is Facebook? I mean, Facebook is not, Facebook is a
community platform.
Well, but not only that, but Facebook has now become a venture capitalist, right? They bought Instagram. True. They're buying all these other businesses. They're doing AI. Yep. The same thing with Google. Google was a search engine. Now it's an AI platform, right? Tesla, a car manufacturer, becoming an AI platform, right? Yeah. These massive companies, then they differentiate themselves, and that's how you change the world.
Because they're expanding themselves.
Exactly.
I have two other questions before you go. I know you got to go quick, right?
Good, so I'm having fun.
I'm curious, right? Like
Mr. Curious.
I'm having so much fun.
I'm huge.
Rick is sweating. I don't let the mic. Rick,
it's okay.
Rick, stop sweating.
No. I'm huge on pushing the boundaries. Okay, and you pushed one of the furthest boundaries. I think you did it for your running for president. Yeah. Okay, getting that presidential bid. What was one thing that you learned after you went through that whole process? What one thing that stood out to you that are like, okay,
I would say that I learned 2 or 3 things that were like, I learned a lot of things, but I would say one of the things that I learned is it's really hard to do something that's never been done before. Yeah. Right. So I was trying to do something that's never been done before, which is to ascend directly from being the mayor to being the president. It's never happened in the history of our country. It happens a lot in other countries, right? It happens a lot in Argentina. It happens a lot in Europe. It happens in, Boris Johnson was prime minister. He was the mayor of London. Mayors of big cities, Bogota, Buenos Aires. They ultimately become the president. So that's just never happened in our country's history. So I think for the people, they're very accustomed to presidents coming from a couple of buckets. Trump disrupted that as a business person, but I think they usually expect them to be a U.S. senator or a governor, right? That's sort of the traditional route. So I think disrupting that, Trump disrupted it. Maybe I felt like I could too. Gotcha. Didn't quite work out. Number 2, and this is a truism oftentimes in politics, when you don't have the resources that other people have, it's always hard. Yeah, DeSantis, for example, had $150 million and he didn't make it. Right, yeah. I had $15 million, so I had a tenth of what he had, and then I'm trying to convince people that it's no. Look at the Miami model, and he's saying no. Look at the Florida model, right? So you're there's a little bit of cannibalization there, right? True. So that was that, and I thought how cool would it be for a young Hispanic with there's 20% of the country is now Hispanic. From a Republican-led city, right? That's so.
I think it would have been great.
It was a unique value to me. It was like
it would have put us on the map even further.
It's a unique value proposition to the voter. I did realize I learned how hard it is to run. How much of a broad knowledge base you need to have, how fast you have to talk on your feet. The things that you see at the local level, these unfairnesses that you see with people trying to hurt you, it happened at the national level too, except there's bigger consequences.
Now there's bigger, there's the whole country.
For sure.
Every which way.
And then one of the things that, through social media, hurricane season's about to start soon, and we always get these crazy videos of just, obscene flooding in downtown and Brickell, and everyone goes crazy and says the city's not doing anything about this, which I don't believe to be true, because I always see the construction being done. What is the city trying to do to assist that flooding and what's happening in downtown and Brickell?
So let me break it down for you. There's 2 areas or 3 areas that consistently we see these videos. One of them is under the 3 395, right? So they're rebuilding the 395 right now. It's $1 billion project.
Yeah.
So part of what was happening, and this is I would love for the people who are watching this to understand this. When a big construction project like that's happening, you have to make sure that you can have drainage support. So what happens? There's things called outfalls, right? And outfalls are what they call gravity based. In other words, the gravity is what pulls the water out. When you have a construction project, the problem with the outfalls is that you're getting construction debris that gets out there. So what happens? You get the social media guys that say,
yes,
that say, "Oh my God, look at this plume of like dust that's coming out with the water." So you go back to the construction team and you go, "You can't do that, right? You're damaging the bay, you're dirtying the bay." So they go, "Okay, fine. What do? They plug it." So what happens when it rains?
It's flooded.
It gets flooded.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you can't let the silt out. You can't let the water out, so you keep the water in. So those are technical engineering issues. So we're trying to pump it out, but we got to clean it. So
we're working on solutions.
Right. So that's issue number one.
Yeah.
And that project will ultimately be built, and when it's built, it will be solved.
Gotcha.
Right. So that is a temporary thing, and I say temporary loosely because these projects take a couple of years. But you'll see the images, and you'll continue to say, "Hey, nobody's doing anything about it." That's not what's happening. Then Brickell. What happens in Brickell and what happens when you have a major hurricane that has a 6 to 8 foot storm surges that follow. We have massive pumps in Brickell. So we take the water, we literally suck it out, and we pump it back into the bay clean, right? When you have a storm surge at 6 to 8 feet, it overwhelms the seawall. So now you're not talking about rain. You're talking about the ocean literally coming into your city, right? There is not enough capacity to suck the ocean out and spit it back out.
That's a Mother Nature situation.
Now the good news, and this is what the media, and I say this, I'm not trying to be critical of the media, but this is the truth, right? Like this is what the media rarely ever reports, is they love to show on CNN and Fox the video of us with boots, wading in 3 foot water in Brickell. What they don't show is in 24 hours it's dry. Why? Because we have first of all, we're still pumping. Right, so it just takes time. Once that storm surge subsides, you're able to do that. But the second thing is we have limestone subsoil. So like the whole entire subsoil is a sponge, right? So it's like a big drain, right? So like everything, so it just drains very, very fast. In 24 hours, it's dry, right? Now, that's not the preference. We're continuing to raise seawalls. We're continuing to add pumping capacity. We have $200 million that we've dedicated to this effort. But I'll tell you that FEMA, which doesn't want to do Miami any favors, which is the Federal Emergency Management Administration, has downgraded our flood risk profile. So what they're in essence recognizing is that the investments that we've made have actually made it less risky for Miami.
Incredible.
And it's actually lowered premiums by about 8%. Now, there's other issues related to insurance. It's a whole other topic. It's mostly state regulated.
We have so many questions.
I know you're short on time.
We want to tell you that we want to keep these mics open for you at this platform because
it's awesome.
We like to say this is a day of Miami, and this is what happens in Miami, and these are things that people want to know what's going on always.
And I'm happy to come back and talk about what it's like to be the mayor, day in the life of the mayor.
I actually had that question. What is the day in the life of the mayor? But we'll say it for another time.
Yeah, awesome, guys.
Mayor,
thank you.
A pleasure.
So thank you, brother. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you, man.
Guys, to the next one.
That was really good, man.